What would you do if your mom's deathbed confession made you question everything you thought you knew about your family and yourself? Hey, Reddit. I'm Sheldon, 31, and a few months ago I lost my mom to cancer. It was the hardest thing I've ever been through, and I'm still trying to process it. But what's been eating at me even more than her passing is what she told me in her final days. A confession that's turned my entire life upside down. I haven't told anyone else about this. Not even my closest friends. It's too big, too heavy, and honestly, I don't even know where to start. Maybe writing it here will help me make sense of it, or maybe it'll just make me feel even more lost. Growing up, my family looked like something out of a Hallmark card. My mom, Sarah, was a stay-at-home parent who always made sure my sister Claire and I felt loved and supported. My dad, Tom, worked long hours as a lawyer when Stidhack, but he still found time to coach my little league games and help with Claire's science projects. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Sure, there were occasional arguments, mostly about my dad's work schedule or how my mom thought he spent too much time on his phone, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. I always thought we were one of the lucky families, solid, unshakable. I didn't realize how much of that was a lie until a few weeks before my mom passed. My mom was in hospice care at the time, and I'd been spending as much time with her as I could. One night, when it was just the two of us, she grabbed my hand and said, "Sheldon, there's something I need to tell you before I go." I thought it was going to be some heartfelt message about how proud she was of me or advice about how to live my life. Instead, she said this: "Your father isn't who you think he is, and neither am I." I didn't understand at first. I asked her what she meant, and she took a deep breath before saying, "Tom isn't your real father." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. She went on to explain that before she met my dad, she had an affair with a man she'd worked with at a bank. She didn't know she was pregnant when she left him, and by the time she realized, she was already dating my dad. She told him the baby was his, and he believed her, or at least he pretended to. I was stunned. I couldn't speak. She must have seen the look on my face because she started crying and saying how sorry she was, how she never meant to hurt me or anyone else. She said my dad had been a good father to me, and that should matter more than biology. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then she dropped another bombshell. The man she'd had the affair with, the man who might actually be my biological father, had reached out to her several years ago. He wanted to meet me, but she turned him away. She said she was trying to protect me, but now, knowing she didn't have much time left, she thought I deserved to know the truth. After she told me, I left the hospice center in a daze. I couldn't wrap my head around it. My entire life, I thought I knew who I was. I thought I knew my family. But now it felt like everything had been built on a lie. I didn't know what to do with the information. I didn't want to tell Claire. She was already struggling to cope with Mom's illness, and I didn't want to pile this on top of everything else. And I definitely didn't want to confront my dad. How do you even bring something like that up? But the more I thought about it, the more questions I had. Did my dad know the truth? If he did, why didn't he ever say anything? And who was this other man, the one my mom had tried so hard to keep away from me? I couldn't let it go. I ended up going back to the hospice center the next day and asking my mom for more details. She told me his name was Eric, and he still lived in the same city where I was born. She didn't have his phone number or address, but said she thought he worked in real estate. That was all I had to go on. After my mom passed, I decided to look for Eric. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I wasn't even sure I wanted to find him. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed answers. I started with a Google search, which led me to a real estate agency where someone named Eric Miller was listed as a senior agent. When I saw his picture on the website, my stomach dropped. He looked like me. Same eyes, same jawline. It was uncanny. I spent days agonizing over whether to reach out to him. What would I even say? "Hi, I think you might be my dad." But eventually my curiosity got the better of me. I sent him an email, keeping it vague. I told him my name, mentioned my mom, and asked if he remembered her. He responded the next day. His email was short but direct. "Yes, I remember Sarah. Let's talk." We met at a coffee shop the following week. The moment I walked in and saw him sitting there, I felt this strange mix of dread and familiarity. He looked nervous, like he didn't know what to expect. I won't bore you with every detail of the conversation, but here's the gist of it. He admitted to having a relationship with my mom. He said he never knew she was pregnant until years later when she contacted him to tell him about me. He'd wanted to meet me, but she shut him down. He said he respected her decision, even though it broke his heart. I asked him if he thought he was my biological father, and he said, "I don't know. I've always wondered." Eric and I talked about getting a DNA test, but when I brought it up with my dad, he completely shut it down. He said he didn't want to reopen old wounds, and that he didn't need a test to know he was my father. He begged me to let it go, saying it wouldn't change anything and would only cause more pain. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to respect his wishes. He'd been there for me my whole life, and I didn't want to hurt him. But another part of me felt like I had a right to know the truth, even if it was painful. I never got the DNA test. I couldn't bring myself to go through with it, knowing what it might do to my dad. But now I'm stuck in this limbo, constantly wondering who I really am, and what could have been different if my mom had told the truth from the start. Eric emails me occasionally, but I've been avoiding him. I feel guilty, like I'm betraying my dad just by talking to him. And yet every time I look in the mirror, I wonder if I'm seeing Eric's face staring back at me. So Reddit, what would you do in my shoes? Would you let it go and move on? Or would you dig deeper, no matter the cost? Because right now I feel like I'll never have peace, no matter what I choose. Update, I thought I could ignore the truth, but it's been eating me alive. Hey Reddit, I didn't think I'd be back with an update, but here I am. I tried to let this go. I really did. But the thing about an identity crisis is that it doesn't just fade into the background, it lingers, it gnaws at you, and no matter how much I try to push it down, the question keeps coming back. Who am I really? I wish I had answers. I wish I could tell you that everything worked out, that I got the closure I needed. But the truth is, things have only gotten messier. After my last post, I told myself I was done. I made a choice. I wasn't going to take the DNA test. My dad had raised me. He was the one who had been there through everything. And I didn't need a piece of paper to tell me what I already knew. That lasted about 2 weeks. Then I started noticing things. Stupid things that wouldn't have mattered before, but now they felt like neon signs flashing in my face. My hands. I've always had these long, bony fingers that never quite matched my dad's thick, square hands. I never thought about it before, but after meeting Eric and seeing that his hands looked exactly like mine, I couldn't stop staring at them. My voice. I played back a voicemail I had from Eric and realized we had the same cadence, the same subtle rasp when we spoke. I made my girlfriend listen to it without telling her why, and she casually asked, "Wait, is that you?" I told her it was a coworker and brushed it off. Old family photos. Claire and I used to joke that she looked exactly like Mom while I was a mix of both parents. But now, looking at those pictures, I saw it differently. She looked like our mom and dad. I just looked like someone else. It started driving me insane. I didn't talk to Eric, but I also didn't block him. His emails sat unread in my inbox, each one like a reminder that I was avoiding something I couldn't ignore forever. Then my dad made it worse. My dad and I don't have deep, emotional talks. That's just not who we are. But a couple of weeks ago, we were having dinner at his house when he said something that caught me off guard. He was talking about how much he missed my mom, how things felt quieter without her around. And then, completely unprompted, he sighed and said, "Sheldon, no matter what happens, you'll always be my son." I froze. He looked at me for a second too long, then went back to eating like he hadn't just thrown a bomb into my lap. I wanted to ask him what he meant, if he was acknowledging the truth, if he knew what Mom had told me before she died. But I didn't, because I was scared. What if he confirmed it? What if he told me that, yeah, he knew all along, but he didn't want to say it out loud? And worse, what if he told me he resented me for it? I sat there, chewing my food like everything was normal while my stomach twisted into knots. That was the moment I knew I had to take the DNA test. I caved. I ordered the damn test. I didn't tell my dad. I didn't tell Claire. I didn't even tell Eric. I just ordered it, spit into the little tube, and sent it off. I thought that once I did it, I'd feel relieved, like I was taking control of my life. But instead, I felt sick. For the next few weeks, I checked my email obsessively. Every morning, every night, multiple times a day. I started having dreams where I opened the results and saw 99.9% match with Eric, and I woke up drenched in sweat. Then finally, the email came. But here's the thing, it wasn't what I expected. When I opened the email, I saw the words, probability of parentage, inconclusive. What? I read it again, and again, and again. Apparently, the sample wasn't clear enough to determine paternity. There was a small chance that Eric was my father, but wasn't definitive. There was also a small chance that he wasn't. It was like the universe itself was refusing to give me a straight answer. I thought I did something wrong. Maybe I sent in the sample incorrectly. I called the company's customer support line, and they basically told me that while most tests are clear, sometimes there are cases where genetic markers aren't strong enough to make a conclusive determination. They suggested I retake the test with a direct family member. And that's when I realized I'd have to ask my dad. I wanted to tell him. I really did. I wanted to walk into his house, sit him down and say, "Dad, I took a test and it was inconclusive. I need you to take one too." But I didn't. Because how do you ask the man who raised you to prove he's really your father? How do you tell him you took a test behind his back because you couldn't take his word for it? I stared at my phone for hours, debating whether to text him. I almost drove to his house twice, but both times I turned around before I even got out of the car. And then the worst part happened. Eric called me. I hadn't even told him I took the test, but I guess he could sense something was up, because when I picked up, the first thing he said was, "You found out, didn't you?" I felt like my chest caved in, because the way he said it, it wasn't a question. It was a statement, like he already knew the answer. I didn't answer Eric. I just hung up. I haven't spoken to him since. I still haven't told my dad. The DNA test results are sitting in my email. Useless. I should feel relieved, right? The test didn't confirm anything, so I could just go on believing what I want to believe. But that's not how it works, because now I know that my dad might not be my biological father. I know my mom lied. I know Eric thinks he's my father. And worst of all, I'll never really know for sure, because I can't bring myself to ask my dad. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me selfish. But the idea of looking him in the eyes and asking for proof of potentially shattering his heart after he's already lost his wife, I just can't do it. So here I am, stuck in limbo. Knowing half the truth but never being able to confirm it, and somehow that feels worse than not knowing at all. So, Reddit, tell me, what would you do? Would you ask your dad for the test and risk breaking his heart? Or would you live with the uncertainty forever, knowing it might haunt you for the rest of your life? Because right now I feel like no matter what I choose, I lose.